Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining. Thanks for joining today's webinar. If you're here, I think you know already what this is going to be about. But still, as a quick introduction, of course, this webinar will be about digital training in a post-COVID-19 world. So, yeah, this webinar will be hosted by Casper, who's here with me today as well. And just to let you know of some practicalities, this webinar is being recorded, so you will receive the recording afterwards, sometime this week. So you can refer back to what was mentioned in that recording. So don't worry about that. But yeah, so the floor is yours, Casper.
Thanks, Tessa. So good afternoon. So I'm Casper. I'm the CEO of L&D-generated. And we did a webinar last year while COVID was just starting up, basically, and we were all going into lockdown. And yeah, so the idea for this webinar is to sort of look back what happened in that year, where are we now, and what are the next steps. To start, I want to sort of go back a bit to that webinar. So one of the things that sort of triggered that is that I read an article from Yuval Noah Harari in the Financial Times. And basically what he described is that he was stating that we were making choices really pressed by time, making quick choices that probably would have a lasting effect. So what I would, so what we said in that webinar, we just went over that. So we made a lot of decisions, and basically everything was different at that time. So a lot of things were arranged, and it was a huge experiment for all of us. And I think we just dove in. So it was also our advice: just make decisions later and experiment now, but do be aware of the fact that what you do now will have an impact, a lasting impact on the future. So that's where we are now, because, and it happened. Let me go first there. So for example, this is an article that was from April last year, that from Microsoft, that what they saw in a growth in Teams, for example, was a jump 2 years ahead in time in 2 months. And even after that, I think it went even bigger. And that goes for a lot of things. And that, of course, Teams and Zoom are huge examples of that. But also with e-learning, it has been a really, really exceptional year in the jump we made. So although the reason, of course, is really bad, we do feel like we are a few years ahead in time within a few months' time. So a lot of things happened. So we asked a lot of our customers, actually, when they were in the midst of all this, so what is it what you are working on? What is it what you need to change? What kind of challenges do you have? So some of the short-term challenges that came up then were from a didactical nature, because of many companies were doing at least a large part of their learning offline, so they had to move that online. Also, a surprisingly big amount of companies went online for learning for the first time, and it was pressured by time, so you had to do it quickly. So how do you do this from a didactic point of view? What does it mean for your trainers? What does it mean for your programs? What does it mean for your materials? So how to create proper content for that, and how to make it engaging. It's a different challenge if you do that through an online session or an e-learning course than when you are face-to-face in a classroom. So those were a couple of didactical challenges that customers told us. Of course, also the psychological challenges. So yeah, how do you motivate people to learn and unlearn? Because you have to do things in a different way. But also, how do you find new ways to communicate and collaborate? So all the small talk, where does that stay? So it's not that hard to have like a Zoom meeting for an actual meeting with an agenda. But how do you keep up with your colleagues? So I know that at L&D-generated, we organized coffee sessions. So we use Slack, for example, as a tool. So somebody could announce, okay, I'm going for coffee, which meant they went online in Slack or in Zoom, and other people could join for just a small talk and stuff like that. So we were experimenting on how to connect to each other and how to do that. And that also, of course, is for learning, and they're really different. So how do you stay in a good mental health while you are in social isolation, and you have to find new routines? So those were challenges. And of course, the social how to compensate for the face-to-face time, how to find new forms of collaboration, of course, technological. So a lot of companies didn't have the tooling, didn't have the network, didn't have the equipment to go online. So everything has to be arranged and changed. So a lot of challenges there. But what it meant is basically that you did make that big jump. So following the example of Noah, you actually started experimenting, make decisions, and did a lot of things in a really short period. So now it's time to look back. Where are we? Where are you? Did you make the right decisions? Are you on the right path? Can you maybe steer them in a better direction, or maybe should you expand on that? Because what you now have should be the groundwork of the years to come. So that is what I want to look into in this webinar. By the way, if you want to ask any questions, feel free to type them into the chat. Tessa is monitoring that, and she will either interrupt me if it's urgent, or ask the questions at the end of the session. So please use the chat for any questions. So we have a model that we use that looks at the state of learning from three different perspectives. So mindset, delivery, and content. So I want to go into all three of them. So the first one is for mindset. I'm really curious to hear from you what kind of initiatives you took as a company to make the move to online learning. So what did you do? Can you please type in some things? And for first, I want to dive into the things that really worked well for you. So which initiatives were successful in moving your learning online? Please type your answer in the chat, and we'll just follow that and see if we can move on that. I see the first reactions coming in already. By the way, I see the first remark in the chat, the world after coronavirus. That's not correct indeed. It's still going on, especially, so for example, I'm in the Netherlands and we have a press conference from our Prime Minister this evening, and he will announce extra measures starting tomorrow. So it's still indeed not over, but it's not, as far as I'm concerned, not the first panic anymore that, okay, we have to move offline, away from our offices, we have to move everything online. It is now a bit more normal situation where we can look back and see what we did, but indeed, it's not over yet. So things that I see that really worked well are learning communities, e-learning courses, making learning spaces for medical staff, learning management system, using L&D-generated to quickly create e-learning. I like that one, of course. Virtual classroom training. So Microsoft Teams. But I see a lot of things indeed are a mix of indeed learning approaches, tooling, initiatives, communities, meeting places for people, virtual classroom training. Okay, so I think that you basically did everything that was expected, and good news is that those things worked for you. But that brings you to sort of the second question, and that is what was not successful. So at L&D-generated, we have a couple of values, and one of the values is we experiment. So, and what we do at L&D-generated, we really try to enforce people to behave according to those values. So if somebody actually behaves according that way, we have used Slack, then you can actually give them a card and give them praise for that. So this is one of the cards that we use for that. We can just drop that in Slack and explain why somebody did that. But if it's not an experiment, if you know it's going to work, was one of the things Jeff Bezos said, and I think that is really true. So you are trying things, but not everything will be successful. But then the interesting thing is, can we learn from that? So I'm just want to ask you to just type in the chat the things that you started up that didn't work for you.
Yes, curious to see what will come in. I see already one comment that it was a bit of a rocky ride from completely in-house training in various offices worldwide. So probably something that others can experience as well if you have international teams.
Yeah, the same was with L&D-generated. We also have offices in more than one country. And of course, also the measures in every country are really different. So for example, in our Ukrainian office is really different than in the Netherlands or in our office in Dubai. And you need to take that into account as well. Well, you have like a global learning program. So that is really hard. Change management was slow and frustrating. That's something that that we hear a lot, that basically IT was not ready for it and they had to move online and we didn't have the infrastructure for it. And that was not something that could happen overnight. But that indeed is a lot. And I think that is also the gain of this, and that is also why I think we made a jump of a few years in time, that now that infrastructure is there everywhere. So now that's not a blocker anymore. So it's really up to us to decide how to use that in a successful way. But it was really rough to get it there. I understand that. Yeah, and indeed, grow together and interaction online is more complicated. And I think that is one of the things that I learned. So as I said, we have offices in a couple of places, and as a CEO, I visit them frequently. And I was not able to do that for a period of almost a year and a half. But last month, for the first time, I was able to travel both to Ukraine and to Dubai and visit the Dutch office as well. So, and then you notice what a difference it makes to have a face-to-face interaction with people, to just be able to talk to them. And I think the same goes for learning. So while e-learning and online learning is a really great thing to have, and of course, we're the biggest advocate of that, it's not always the best solution. So sometimes it adds different things, that more things, or in different situations, other things, to do things face to face. So I think that one of the things that I learned is that it's not either online or offline, but it's probably the mix that will give you the best result. Yeah, the need for human interaction, the missing that. New starters, yeah, that's a big thing. That's also something that we struggled with at Easy-Generated. So we had a full lockdown for a while. But when we were able to open up a bit, we are hiring a lot of people. So we gave them preference to go to the office first, to actually work together with their mentors to make sure that they were onboarded, because building a culture, introducing people in your company when you do not have a face-to-face contact is really, really hard. And one of the things that I see is really interesting, what didn't work was to convert live events into to online remote events. A lack of interconnections among the participants. For example, I experienced that myself as well. So I went to, in the past, to a lot of e-learning conferences, and most of them went online, and it wasn't the same. So you did still get all the information from the presentation and the speakers, but what you don't have is meeting the people in the hallway, talking to people, overhearing a conversation next to you while you're having lunch and stuff like that. So it is different. So, okay, clear. So I think that the connecting part is the bigger thing. And of course, the other thing that I get from it, the technology part, arranging that, getting it there. Okay, that's really helpful. So that's an interesting insights. Okay, let's move along. So part of that mindset is, of course, looking where you are now. So is remote working in your organization to stay? What I hear from most of our customers that I talk to is that it is a permanent stay. And of course, it depends on what you do. If you are a factory or production company, people are now moved back into the factories for as much as it can. But if you are more like an office situation, for example, Easy-Generated, of course, is something where we do all our work online anyway. So the question is really, what does it do for our offices? What does it do for our learning strategy? Because if people are staying remote for at least a significant part of the work week, that is a big change. So if you are sort of looking at where you are now, you also need to try to figure out, is what you see happening now, is that a permanent thing? Is that going to revert? So we don't know what's going to happen with COVID. As we said before, it's not gone yet. And the question is, I don't think it will be gone. It's more like how can we make it that we can handle it in a proper way? But I think those are the important questions to ask. So remote working, is that there to stay? Or do you think that it will go back more to the office, or maybe even completely? One of the things that I learned from the conversations that I have with a lot of learning managers is that in the breakthrough that we had to make, because we had to move online, we changed a lot of stuff. And with that also some things that were really hard to change were finally changed. And I also know that in some companies, there's sort of a reflex now. Things are opening up again to go back to the pre-COVID situation as much as possible. But be really careful there, because you made a couple of changes in your whole setup, moving things online. Don't give that away. Just be really cautious to see what do you want to move online, what do you want to keep keep online, what do you want to move offline again. But also take into account that probably this is not the last time we are in this situation. So if this pandemic is over, the next one will come. So also take into account whatever you do, do it in a way that you can actually sort of do it again, move everything online if you need to, without all the stress that you had. So look back and see what kind of lessons did you learn yourself. Okay. Just let me see. Then I want to move to the second step, which is delivery. And I want to ask you, which learning systems did you add? So a lot of companies bought tools like L&D-generated learning management systems, learning experience platforms, or more. But also, let me first ask you the question, and I have a poll for that. I'm really curious to find out which systems did you actually add during COVID? So did you install a learning management system? Did you buy or install a learning experience platform? Did you work with a learning record store or added a learning record store? And did you do something with an authoring tool? So the answers are coming in. Okay. There's still a few. Okay. So we see that a bit more than half of the attendees, so even close to 60%, added an authoring tool. So a tool like L&D-generated or another tool to create courses. A learning management system is at 2. I'm a bit surprised there, but okay. Then we have a learning experience platform, and we have only 2 learning record stores. I will dive into that a bit later, a bit deeper. But I think that what is really important for yourself to ask yourself is this really working for us? Are those systems work for us? Are they delivering what we need? And are they also for the longer period, the things that need? Because one of the things that really changed in the world of learning is the fact that a learning solution is not a one tool solution anymore. So it's not like in the old days, buy a learning management system and you're there. It is much more. So right now, today, we're looking much more at what we now call a learning ecosystem. So I will go over these elements in a moment. I will just and Paul. Thank you for that. So it is what I said. It's not about a single tool. So in the poll, there were 4 systems, and maybe it's an idea to go over them quickly, because probably you need all those elements to build like the foundation for your learning ecosystem. So look where you are and see what you have. So an authoring tool is really important, of course. It is to create content. It is to create courses. If you don't have online material, you need an authoring tool to create that. So that is one. The second one is the one that was also answered most after an authoring tool is the learning management system. The other one that we have there is a learning experience platform, and they're sort of the same things, but in a different way. So I think that just to understand what the difference is, and I think you probably need both, or a system that can at least do both. So what you want is something that facilitates top-down learning, and you want something that facilitates bottom-up learning. Just to explain that a bit more. So if you have a learning or basically a desire as a company to prove that you're capable of doing something. So we're talking about security, we're talking about compliance. Those are things that you as a company need to prove that you can do. You need to make sure that everybody in your company knows the law, knows those rules, knows how to work in a secure way, and you have to be ready for an audit on that. So that kind of learning, it is really logical to push that top down. So you as a learning department, create those scores and you tell the learner, you have to take this, you will get a result, and then we will have a proof for the auditor that everybody in the company actually took that course and passed the exam. So that is something you can facilitate with a learning management system. But in our experience, that is only a very small percentage of the learning you have to do. So it is maybe 10 or 20%. So quite recently we had a panel with, and one of them was the learning manager from Danone, Fred, and he told us that he thinks it's only less than 5%. And he's doing that with, he creates that content centrally, has a learning management system to run those courses, but the rest of the learning, and that is in his idea, more than 95%, is learning that you just need as a learner, where the learner is in charge. So it's much more that the learner decides when they want to do that. So you only facilitate them with the learning. So the difference between those two systems is a bit like a TV versus Netflix. So an LMS is really like a TV, where you broadcast a certain program and people have to follow it. So they don't have a choice. They can do it or they can't do it, or they will not do it, but that's it. So you determine that. And that's the only thing that they can do, is follow it or not follow it. Learning experience platform is much more like Netflix. So same content, so all the courses and all the information is there, but it's just waiting for the learner to come in and pick whatever they need whenever they need it. So that means that the responsibility for the learning is with the learner. It's a really different approach. And what we learned while we were working from home is that the second part becomes more and more important, because people learn so much from each other. So you need to have a way to capture the knowledge in your company and share it with other people. And if you don't facilitate that bottom-up learning, then you are missing out on a lot. So the top-down learning is only a small percentage what you need. So don't forget the bottom-up learning. And I only saw 2 learning experience platforms. And maybe that is because all of you already had one. I'm not sure, but it's something to look into. Make sure, and if you want to have an LXP or something else, that's not that important, but make sure you facilitate both stretches, so both the top-down, but also do not forget the bottom-up learning. It's way bigger than the top-down. I also only thought 2 learning record store, and that is something to discuss. So if you have an LMS, I really hope you selected an LMS that is in the cloud and has support for XAPI. Just to explain a bit on that, if you do learning, especially if you do top-down learning, you want to track and trace results. You want to know how people did. And for that, in the old solutions, we used a standard called SCORM. It will port back to a learning management system, so you can actually see how many people took the course, how many passed, and things like that. We now have a next standard on that will follow up or has followed up on SCORM, which is called XAPI. It's a bit more modern system, it's more open, and will give you way more capability of tracking and tracing things. But the most interesting thing is that if you track and trace through SCORM, your results will be in your learning management system. Which means if you want to switch from learning management system A to learning management system B, you can't take the results with you. You lose all your historical data. Or if you are using 2 systems, like you have a learning management system and a learning experience platform, and you want to track and trace the results in one database, you can't do that through SCORM. XAPI does do that. And the thing is, XAPI, there are learning management systems that have the database for those results, which is called an LRS, a learning record store. So it stores the learning records, so the actual outcome of the learning. So make sure that that is independent of your LMS. So if you want to switch from your LMS or you want to plug in another tool, that you are in control. So a couple of things to check on the infrastructure that you started to build during COVID. Is it in the cloud? If not, you probably have not the most modern software. Check if it supports both the top-down and the bottom-up learning processes. Make sure that you are in charge of your learning record store, of your results, that you are the king of the castle there. Make sure you have your own database or have a separate solution where you know that if you want to move away, that you can download those results at least. make sure that you are in control there. And also use a separate authoring tool, preferably, of course, Easy-Generator, but the principle is really that don't create the content in your LMS, because the same thing will happen. You can't move away from your LMS because your content is locked in there. So that is sort of the business strategy of a lot of LMSs. If you create content in the LMS, if you have your results in LMS, even if you want to go away, you can't. They create a vendor lock-in. So make sure you're not caught there. So please do it sort of a check on the things that you set up. And before you move on and taking that to the next level, make sure you sort of follow these rules. Okay, so that was on delivering. And of course, an important part of that is also the content creation. And yeah, we saw a huge boost in what we call employee-generated learning. With working from home, the need for small pieces of information, small support piece of support information, small courses on how to do certain things, they increased tremendously. A lot of things that you normally would just ask your neighbor or walk over to somebody to ask, it became harder to do because you are more disconnected. So there was a huge increase in demand for that. And this kind of information is not the information you can create from a central point. So you as a learning department or an instructional designer or whatever, or HR department, it's impossible to sort of create that content. You can only facilitate that process. And we really believe that employee-generated learning is a solution for that. I want to dive in a bit deeper there to make sure that you understand this properly. Oh, sorry. So this is the process on how you create content through a central department, which is the old school default way. So you have a learning and development department with an instructional designer that will interview people in the business as subject matter experts, getting the information from the business, combining that with the instructional design knowledge, and creating a course that is published through a learning management system. The thing is that that process is really slow, because getting the information from the employees into the instructional designers and checking back and forth if it's correct will take a lot of time. So it will take a lot of time, it's expensive, and it's slow. But the third thing is even more important. That process will make it impossible to maintain. The information will never be up to date, and that is because the instructional designer is responsible for the content and not the business. So the business things are changing every day. New insights, new practices, changes in the business, everything happens there pretty fast. If you are not connected to the business and instructional designer, you will not know that, and you will not be able to update your course. So you can't keep it up to date. So my conclusion, and this is the main reason why we started with Easy-Generator, is we spend a lot of time and a lot of money to teach people outdated stuff. You don't want that to happen. And the only solution for that is actually to make sure that your subject matter experts create the content. And when we started with employee-generated learning, the goal was mostly to create courses with that. But with COVID, we found there is even a way bigger need, because people need to know the small stuff, the small things that they usually would get from their neighbors. And they need more instruction, they need more explanation. So make sure that is captured, but capture that in the business, and make sure that the business is also responsible for keeping it up to date. And the learning department, instructional designers, they're there to facilitate that process, to make it possible, to make sure it happens on a proper level of quality. And what we also see is now, it's not just a learning management system that is used to push that information to the learner, or where the learner can actually go to get it. It's also a learning experience platform, but also we see a lot of performance support software coming on, and people are also using intranet, but also tools like Slack and Teams and stuff like that. They are also being used for learning and performance. So employee-generated learning is the way forward. In our mind, it already was the way forward, but now with people working more from home, and I think also working permanently from home for at least a part of their time, the need for that is even bigger, because you need to have more information that is readily available, and you can't do that from a central point. You can't create that, you can only facilitate that. So that's one of the lessons that we learned. The other thing that you really need to take into account is where are you with people? And really important, basically you have to look at three groups of people. It is, of course, your stakeholders, the management in your company. How did they deal with the move, and how do they feel now? So are they happy with the move? Are they struggling? Are they sort of pushing for people to go back? If you want, for example, to implement an employee-generated learning strategy, you need support of the management team and the managers in the field, because if they telling the people that it's not important to create content and they have to do their normal job, then it will not happen. So they need to be aware how important it is that we share that information, that we capture that information, and they need to tell their people that they need to do that. So it's really important to see, where are you with your management? Are they aligned? Are they saying and doing the right things for you? So I would think that you should do a survey or anything like that to sort of find that out, talk to them at least, depending on how big or how small you are. The same with the learners. So a lot of learners went online, or all of the learners went online. And for a large part, they really liked that. There are also parts where they didn't like it that much. We already saw that in the feedback that we gathered. So it's also something you should take into account. So check with the learner, see what benefits they got from learning online, but also what things are holding them back, and use that before making final decisions on how to move your learning ecosystem, how to move your learning processes in a different direction. So check where you are. And also look at your learning department. So you have been stretched probably during COVID because you had to do everything in a different way. And sometimes you have to move everything online because you didn't do anything before that online, or you had to move a part online, and you need to come up with ways to sort of create new ways of duplicating that learning content while taking benefit of the online environment and making sure you sort of compensate for what you miss in the offline environment that you didn't have. So make sure that you check your learning department, but also if you are moving more to learning experience platform, if you are moving more in the direction of learning employee-generated learning, do you have the skills in your learning department to actually facilitate those processes? Those are different skills than instruction design skills, for example. Which I'm not saying that we don't need it anymore, but we need other skills as well. So really look at the skill gap that potentially is there in your learning department and see, what do you need to be successful 2 years from now? I also want to take a small dive, only a tiny one, into pedagogy. Hard to pronounce, sorry for that. So there are many models, many approaches that you can actually use. I just want to put a highlight on one of them, and that is one that we call the flipped classroom. This one has turned out to be like a really valuable one amidst of COVID, because it is how you sort of can move from offline to offline learning in a really practical way, and actually even get better learning outcomes than before. So the flipped classroom really comes from education. So the old situation was that you would make your homework in your class, that you would get a lecture in your class, and your homework, of course, you do at home. But if you then get stuck while applying that knowledge in the assignment you get, you don't have support from your teacher. So they came up in the education with the flipped classroom, which means you have an online form, either a lecture on video or an e-learning course that is basically transferring the knowledge that you need to do. And then the homework, the assignment is being done in the classroom. And the cool thing there is you don't have to transfer the knowledge. So you can actually see, how do you apply that knowledge? How do you work with that knowledge? And then if you get stuck, the teacher's there to help you out with their insight and their experience. And that means instead of just transferring knowledge, you are actually getting deeper learning where people are able to apply that knowledge. And that's what you need, because just knowing stuff doesn't add any value. They need to be able to act on it. And after that, you can, of course, use e-learning again to keep the learning up to date, to sort of check with them, maybe send them a survey, because you also know that there is something called the forgetting curve. So if you learn something, if you don't repeat it, if you don't use it, you will forget it pretty quickly. So then it means you need to make sure that you repeat things. And e-learning is a perfect way of doing that. Just sending them small assessments, maybe a small repetition course, or a video with a reminder of the highlighted things that you learned and that you applied. And that will make sure that they become really competent in that. And they will not forget it anymore. It will be transferred into their long-term memory. So flipped classroom is a really valuable model. And we saw one of our customers, Electrolux, actually doing that. So they already did this, by the way, pre-COVID. So they went from instructional led, so ILT led, to a blended approach. And they gave Easy-Generated to all their trainers. So we started working there with the sales department. So they sell appliances and they do that through a network of partners. So their partners need to be trained in how to sell equipment. And they actually had trainers go traveling all over Europe to train people in a 3-day course on how to sell their equipment. So then they bought Easy-Generated and they taught all the trainers to put all the knowledge into an Easy-Generated course. And they asked people who had to take the training to take that upfront. And they brought the training back to a 1-day event where they just were talking about how to apply that. They were doing role play and stuff like that. So it really helped them. And basically what they did, they implemented the flipped classroom with that. And it was really successful. And with COVID, of course, the last day that they had still offline had to move online as well. So they're now completely online. And it's really successful because it's more scalable, it's a deeper level of learning, and it's a better return on investment as well. So I think it's a really great example on how they use the flipped classroom to move their learning, at least for a part, online. And as far as I'm concerned, it's also not that you should do everything online and that you should do everything with employee-generated content. Because there is, we just came up with this table where you have 6 elements that decide, is it L&D generated? So is it centrally generated by your learning department, or is it employee generated? And by the way, you can also read that published in a learning management system, if it's from L&D, it's top down, or published in a learning experience platform, if it's from an employee created. So these 6 things, if they apply, then probably it's a good thing to do it from a central learning department. So if the course or the learning material will impact more than 12.5% of your workforce, if it's a global thing, if it's within your top 5 priority, if the stakeholder is on a senior level, so VP or more senior, if it's about security or compliance, so you need to have the results, and if the speed of change is low. So it's not that important that the process of developing that and keeping it up to date is really slow. If those things, of those boxes are checked, then you can consider doing it centrally and pushing it down via a learning management system. But as I said, that is only a small percentage of your learning content. So if they do not apply, so that's the right side of the table, then consider using employees to create content, and most importantly, make them responsible for keeping it up to date. So where does that bring us? So this is a research done by Fosway, which is a company that does all kind of research in the world of learning. They create quadrants and stuff like that. And they found that 94% of the respondents on their survey said that they actually did make significant changes in what they do. So it's basically a major swing to digital learning. And also on the questions, do you think that you will go back to before? So will L&D be the same? Only 5% answers, yes, we will revert back to what we used to do. So we will not change. Small group doesn't know that, but most group, the vast majority, 2/3, are saying no, these changes do create a major shift in what we do and how we do it, and it's there to stay. And probably the same will go for you, that the majority of you made changes that you want to keep. So it's more finding out what are the things that didn't work for you and improve them, and then build from there, then reverting back to what you did before. So the conclusion and advice from us is make an inventory, set goals, make a plan, see where you are, fix the foundation errors if you have them, and then make a plan for a few years ahead. But do not just revert back to where you were before COVID, because you will throw away what you learned. And also, I think you will not be ready for the future. And you do need a blended approach. And I think the flipped classroom model is a nice example of that. But blended is everywhere. It's a blend between centrally created and employee generated. It's a blend between a learning management system approach and a learning experience approach. and it's a blend between a lot of things, so offline and online as well. So find out what works best for you. And what we see is that there's a big shift from offline to online, and now it's up to you to find the proper balance to see how you can bring that forward in the best way.